Welcome. Oh my God.
Go on, you talk.
I said welcome to another rendition of a Sika Strength Q&A podcast. If you're listening to this on the Spotify or one of those podcast platforms and you'd like to see our two ugly mugs chatting in a poorly lit room, you can go to YouTube, to the Sika Strength YouTube channel, and watch this podcast. If you're watching the podcast and you think, maybe I want a more audio friendly version, to listen to in the car during your commute or something,
You're wasting precious question time, Fitz.
Yeah, you can basically listen to this in podcast form as well. So Garth, hit us up with the first question.
I'm going to go in with Goody. What about creatine?
What about creatine?
Well, for Fitz, you go. You love creatine.
So creatine is basically one of the only dietary supplements that really has any like ergogenic aid effect. Kind of well documented scientific studies. So if you're a power athlete, if you're somebody who uses the creatine system extensively, which realistically everybody does, if you're doing things that are going between like 10 seconds like around the 10-second mark, so sprints, high intensity, one of those nice buzzwords, if you start taking creatine, you will basically, like, creatine is something you can make ATP out of. ATP is energy in inverted commas. So if you have more creatine in your system, which taking supplementary creatine will allow you to have, you can basically go harder for longer.
My opinion on creatine is, like with all supplements, it's borderline useless and basically waste your money. Like if we're being...
Yeah, I think the thing to note is that every supplement is useless, and that people take creatine thinking they'll get the effects of steroids, and it's just not. That's just not what happens.
I was like, so we've covered this in our supplement podcast, our quick review of our supplements. And obviously, so it's very well studied. It's unbelievably safe. It could not be safe. I don't even know why that ever needs to be studied. Well, but it had to be answered, I suppose. It does what it's supposed to do in your body. You can take it and it's very cheap and it's going to have no side effects. But honestly, I don't think it's going to do much for you. And there's no reason not to take creatine. Like financially, it's very cheap, I suppose. And like we kind of mentioned on that podcast as well.
I think, if you're somebody who lives within that energy system, if you live just in there, so you're like a rugby player or a football player or a sprinter, like, by all means, there's non-responders and there's responders. That's very, very well documented. Take it for a while, see if it works for you, see if you notice a difference, and fuck it, if it makes you feel like you're better, then just keep taking it. You know, don't overcomplicate these things by saying, oh well, you know, I feel great on this, but then somebody said, you know, like, whatever, even if it's just a placebo effect, take it for a little while, see does it make a difference. You'll spend €15 getting some, and then it's no big deal if it doesn't work.
That's actually a great answer. It's basically, if it feels like it works for you, then go for it.
And obviously, like, look, if somebody's trying to sell you a magnet bracelet that's going to make you better at balancing, don't be an idiot.
But in general, there's kind of no reason not to take creatine.
There is some scientific rigor to the stuff that's been done.
So next question is, should beginner intermediate athletes use priliepins chart to program for strength? My opinion on priliepins chart is it is a useful kind of visualization tool to understand what the different reps are if you have no idea about strength training. So if you've never done any strength training before and you've no idea what percentages feel like and what kind of effect they have and what kind of reps you could do at certain percentages, then it's a useful tool to look at kind of once and go, okay, so I can't do 10 reps at 98%. Okay, that makes sense, you know. But I wouldn't be going, okay, so I'm planning out my next 4 months of training and I'm going to go, okay, I need to do this many reps at this percentage and then do this, you know, like it doesn't really, it's like, it doesn't do anything for you.
I think it's more in principle. Like understanding the process rather than using it as your rule of thumb, you know. So I think it's more a system whereby if you're a beginner and if you're saying like, oh, look, I could do this amount for 10 reps, this is roughly what this percentage is. It won't be bang on, and don't start thinking like what I hate is people being like, oh well, I did 180 for 3, so I'd say my 1RM is 200, you know?
Yeah.
It's your 1RM isn't 200. Your 1RM is the most amount of weight you've done one rep for. So I think with all those things, I think they're valuable.
Yep.
I think understanding why the numbers are the numbers is valuable, and understanding like the kind of the principle around it, again, you can learn a lot from, but don't stick to it. Or like Joe, those online rep calculators.
Yeah.
Like, they're cool to play around with if you've never trained, or like you're trying to figure it out, or it's your first time maxing out, then it's kind of cool, but like they don't mean anything.
Like, what I think is useful is to visualize kind of someone had to do it. So someone had to write that down. Someone had to write down, like, this is the optimal number of reps you should do at a certain percentage, and then that's it. So it's useful for a beginner to understand that you kind of look for volume landmarks and you go, okay, so I have 85% of my 1RM and I need to do about 25 total reps of this, and then this should elicit a positive response.
Yeah.
And it gives you the understanding that you need to look at your total number of lifts at that percentage, and that's how you progress, is by adding more reps at the same or more weight, and that's how you progress. So it's a useful tool. It makes sense. No one disagrees with it, but I don't think it's something I would be basing my programs off of, because you need to learn. You might be that kind of lifter where you can only do, so let's say you have 85%, so let's say your max is 240 back squat.
Yeah.
85% is something like 205. So you go, I would like to be able to do 25 total reps in a session.
Yeah.
So this is kind of, I'm basing my max at the moment at 240 because that's the most I've squatted. Say 2 weeks ago I said I'm going to get 15 total reps in this session.
Yeah.
Next session I wanted 20 to 25 total reps at the same weight. So it's a form of progressing. I've gone from, I haven't changed the weight, so I kept the same weight because it's a useful weight. So 80 to 85% is a great place for strength training, because you can do a certain number of reps. It's heavy enough, it's close enough to your max that it's useful, but it's not so light that you have to do sets of 10, you know. So it's
it's also a place where you're getting a huge amount of power output.
Yeah.
As a strength athlete.
Yeah.
Most normal athletes are going to be around 60 to 65%, whereas as the strength athlete you are, Garth, you'll get most of your kind of power effects at 80% of your 1 rep max. So that is, I think, the other place we can draw value from those kind of charts and those kind of rule of thumbs is that they force you to track your things a bit more, and they force you to just pay attention to things a bit more. So if you're like, firstly, I think if you're a beginner, you shouldn't be programming for yourself.
Yeah,
I think
right.
you're going to stunt your progress in every single facet of it. It's fun and it's great and it's cheap, obviously, because you're not paying yourself, but
you'll waste years.
You will waste years, and you'll probably, like, you'll be the reason that you'll stop strength training or stop going to the gym.
Oh, that's a powerful word, Sits.
But you will.
Yeah.
And like, we've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times.
Yep.
So I don't think you should be using it to program for yourself, because I don't think you should be programming for yourself.
Yeah.
But I think it is valuable. It's also valuable that you're paying attention to these things and you're noting.
Yeah.
Like, fuck it. If you look at that chart and say, well, I'm going to find out what my 8 rep max is, that's valuable in itself, because you're taking account and you're like actually tracking what's going on.
Yeah, like, it's so incredibly useful just to be exposed to the concept that the optimal number of total reps at something like 85% is this many reps.
Yeah.
And then the optimal number of reps at like 75% is this many reps. So I'm not too sure how low he goes. Oh, he goes to 55 to 60% is total number of reps, 24. So he's saying stuff like 80 to 90% optimal number of reps is 15 reps per set is 2 to 4. So it's just great to be, it's like a scientific tool almost. It's a principle. It's like fucking Pythagoras theorem or some kind of first principles derived maths. You know, it's someone had to do it.
Yeah.
It's useful for people to see. So when you're learning about programming, you're like, you just get a ballpark of what the ideas are.
Yeah.
And then you go, okay, this is not something I can really implement because I'm just a beginner. I don't really know what I'm doing. But this is something I'm going to be, you're going to go to yourself, okay, in 5 years' time, I'm going to have a better understanding of this.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So... next question. The next one is, hang on, what would you recommend to do with a barbell and 80 kg worth of plates, GPP can't afford more plates?
Okay. I'd start by saying
Weightlifter.
he's a weightlifter.
Yep.
Okay, so 80 kilos for everybody is enough for GPP.
Yep.
Like, I don't know any weightlifter we've ever met who would do their GPP much higher than 80%, unless they're doing like super high reps.
80, sorry, I think, did he say 80 kilo plates?
80 kilo. So 100 kilos.
80 kg, yeah, so 100 kilos total.
Okay, yeah, so that's plenty. What I'd start doing is, like, depending on this, like, all GPP conversations start the same, but it depends how long you have to do your GPP, and then how long you have in an actual specific phase before you go into competition. If you're a weightlifter and you're not going to be competing realistically till December or January, over this side of the pond anyway, I'd start my GPP incredibly broad.
Sorry, actually, I need to clarify the question. So he just said he wanted to know, is GPP what he would do, or would you recommend other stuff?
I think
GPP is a good place to start anyway.
Yeah, GPP is always good.
Yeah.
And I would start very general, very broad. I do loads of different, like, if I was a weightlifter and if I was in the situation now where I knew I wasn't going back to weightlifting for a while, I'd definitely pick 4 or 6 weeks just to do a general block, and then if I was going to be competing a bit earlier, I'd just start weightlifting straight away and start with a nice broad range of stuff for weightlifting. If you're in the first category, I would go on to like powerathlete.com or any number of websites, Sika and I would get an off-season strength and hypertrophy program. That's what I would do. I would look at, like, look somewhere else from your current situation and get a program and just follow that for 6 or 8 weeks. Following a hammer throwers program for 6 or 8 weeks will probably make you better if you're using their GPP stuff. If you're a weightlifter now and you've like 80 or 100 kilos, even if you're snatching whatever 140, you can still do the first period of training. Like, you can't do your deadlifts and you can't do your squats, but you can do pretty much everything else. Make sure you're getting in good work capacity stuff, because that will really, really stand to you in 2 or 3 months' time.
Like, unless your maxes are something like 75 and 95, you know, if that is the case, then you can train as productive as normal. You just won't be able to do a whole lot of squats. Yeah. But you'll be able to do very productive snatch and clean and jerk. But if your maxes are somewhere in the region of 120 and 150 plus, like 3x5 at 80 kilo snatch is hard for everyone. It's just shit. Like, once you get over 3 reps in anything, the snatch, it's just hard. So you can do as many high rep sets as you want. And if you know you can get back to training in like 6 weeks, there's no reason you can't start doing sets of 4 and 5. And like, for like, if some of the Sika weightlifting blocks, there's 4s in them.
There's 4s in them, and people feel like they're being assaulted by 4s.
Yeah, people it feels like, someone actually mentioned that. They said it's like being punched in the throat. Well, like, it's needed to know. So we program 4s and 5s in some of our lifters when needs be. So you can always work on technique. So you can work on technique with an empty barbell. So if you have anywhere, 75% is a great place to work on technique for weightlifting, because you're still working on like speed in weightlifting, although all weightlifting should be fast, but it's kind of like those reps can always be fast for you. Yeah. They won't be incredibly fatiguing. You can do a lot of sets in them in a short period of time. So you can kind of practice your technique, but you can also get a little bit of like kind of work capacity work in a shorter period of time. And then you can try to be smart with it. But obviously if your maxes are low, you can just do normal training. Yeah. If your maxes are high, you can never ever have too good a technique. You can never do too much technique work in weightlifting. And you can never have enough work capacity. And just to touch on the GPP kind of work you could do with that is no end of single leg work. So like lunges, walking lunges, reverse lunges, overhead lunges, split squats, fucking front squats, zombie squats, high rep back squats, fucking... Yeah, I would say as well, like site specific hypertrophy. Yeah. If you're somebody who's like their back gets tired, or their if their knees get sore, do like loads of VMO work. Like do loads of just back extensor work. Do things like identify a few weak spots and spend like 80 kilos is enough hypertrophy weight for anybody. Yep. Like nobody's going to be doing like sets of 8 on a pistol squat with more than 80 kilos or more than 100 kilos. I think do your work capacity stuff. Make sure you've really, really nice, pretty technique. Make sure the bar is moving well and moving fast, and then do your like site specific hypertrophy work. How many? That was question number 2, was it?
That was 3.
That was 3.
Yeah.
Okay, so next one is an interesting one that I want to talk about is left erector bigger than my right erector. Tips on how to get my right side bigger. So this is literally no athlete in the world, and this kind of came into the kind of whole training sphere like maybe 10 years ago about being unilaterally balanced.
Yeah.
Now we love unilateral work, but we don't prescribe unilateral work because Fitz's right VMO is a little bit thicker than his left VMO. We prescribe unilateral work because you have to do unilateral work because it's important to do for strength training. You know, it's important to not neglect any area. So he needs to be, if he increases the strength in his left leg on a certain exercise and on his right leg, it's going to help, you know, it's going to transfer.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people worry, every single athlete on earth, every single person has differences from left side to right side in terms of muscular size and strength. Like, it's just impossible to be perfect. There's a case of where they studied the stride lengths of runners at a European competition, I think, and the biggest discrepancy in stride length from, I think, left side to right side was up to 20 centimeters, and that was in a medalist, I think. So they'll let you know that if people are winning, like, it's not causing a lack of performance. Now it might be causing some kind of injury, it could be causing some lack of performance, but realistically, like, so in this case, it may not be causing an issue. Now, unless you have a hunchback of Notre Dame on one side and a normal on the right side, then you should be like, there is
where I get concerned isn't when I see a muscle being bigger on one side or differences in symmetry, but when I see weakness on one side and then no necessary weakness on the other. So you can see it on like split squats, you might be able to see it on assisted pistols or something, where somebody on their dominant leg is very capable, they're able to do something, they might be able to do it at body weight or more than body weight, and then on one side they're piss poor. That's where I start to get concerned, you know. But like everybody, so you know, your man like Magnus Mechnan or something, the rock climber guy we were talking about last week.
Yes.
So like, he was a very, very good rock climber. He's obviously very YouTube famous now, but he was a serious competitive rock climber, and he has 20% more muscle fiber in his right arm than he does in his left. Jesus. And when you look at rock climbing's an extremely symmetrical sport. You know, they're like, they're always like, it's both hands are working. So these discrepancies happen all the time. If you look, the EWF published a paper 3 years ago now on muscle fiber density, or just cross-sectional area of muscle fibers in the front leg of the split jerk versus the back leg, and you've up to 30% difference. So 30% more muscle in the front quad than you do in the quad of the rear leg. That's just what's going to happen. Whether people had more muscle mass in one leg, so they put that leg forward to be the stronger leg, or whether just that leg going forward through weightlifting training is the reason they develop more muscle, it's not a big deal. And then the last thing I would say on this is, like, look, just go and work on a weakness if you have it. But people get obsessed with this thing of like, oh, I need to make sure like both my shoulders are the same size. If you break your arm and you're going to like a very good physiotherapist or good doctor or surgeon or whatever it is, if I break my left arm, the number one thing I'm going to do is keep training my right arm as hard as possible. So I'm pushing progression curves, I'm really working the right arm as hard as possible, because you have bilateral transfer, so you have increased neuromuscular stimulus in the injured arm, so the arm that's not being trained at all. You've better hormonal levels in the arm, so like growth hormone and things like that in the arm that isn't being trained at all. And then just you, by training your non-trained, so like your injured arm will be in a better state if I keep training my non-injured arm. So what I'm basically saying is, like, you can keep training one side as much as you want, but like, fix it if it's a weakness. Don't get caught up in it if it isn't a clear weakness.
So like, if Fitz was saying, let's say you're doing like seated shoulder press, and on one side you can rep out 20 kilo dumbbells for like sets of 10, and then the left side you're struggling with 10 kilos for 5, that's when you go, oh, this looks like a huge discrepancy, this is an accident waiting to happen. Whereas if you're something like, you can do say 20 for sets of 10 on the right side, and then you can do like 20 for sets of 8 or 9 on the left side for like the last 2 sets, then that's absolutely, I don't think that's anything in particular to worry about. I don't think you should waste valuable training resources murdering that left side again. Now, what we always do say is you let the weaker side dictate the weights and reps used. So if you can only do, say, 20 for 8 on the left side, you only go to 20 for 8 on the right side. So you don't want to facilitate a bigger discrepancy. You just want to you acknowledge it, and then you try bring them closer if it is an issue. So like if you're a weightlifter, it wouldn't be ideal to have one side massively stronger.
No.
Whereas, you know, if you're a bodybuilder or a normal strength athlete, if they're very, very similar, it probably doesn't really matter that much.
No.
And I don't think that's it's just all about finding, you know, using your training resources really valuably and not wasting mental and physical energy.
Just as you're pulling off the last question there, Gareth,
Yep.
like when people get caught up in these things and then suddenly they're doing 4 extra sets of single arm dumbbell bench to try and make their pec bigger and more even on the other side, a lot of the time those discrepancies are formed for a reason. So if you have somebody who's like using a certain working pattern in work, or if you're like a racket athlete or an athlete like a hockey athlete or something like that, you'll develop into particular ways for a reason. So you don't necessarily need, like you would, like there's, I've said this now 3 times, but there's a reason you've developed like that. If the person asking about their erectors is saying like, oh, one side is bigger than the other, like that's for a reason, and we're definitely not able to say what that reason is now. But if your weightlifter and your VMO is 30, or your quad has 30% more muscle fiber in it on one side than it does on the other, that will obviously affect your pull, and that could just be throwing your pull slightly off to one side, which would cause one side of your erectors to be bigger than the other.
Okay, so next question is best lower back exercises.
Oh, I love it.
So, you know,
do you want to go every second one?
Okay, you go first.
Favorite lower back exercise is a reverse hyper, and not necessarily like you don't have to do reverse hypers on a reverse hyper machine or anything. If you get 2 boxes, so 2 plyo boxes, and stack them up on top of each other, so when you jump up and your hips are hanging off the edge, that your feet aren't touching the ground, you can then just like hold on to like a bar or something out in front of the box and do your reverse hypers, double leg, single leg, every second leg, or like the gym in Bandon is perfect because we've like a windowsill of an old office that you can kind of hang off, and you do your reverse hypers off that. I think there's just something so valuable in like a really strong concentric with a hold at the top, and then like a prolonged eccentric with a nice amortization phase at the end.
For me, it's got to be back extensions. So like hyper extensions are my favorite lower back exercise. I don't do a whole lot of them, but I did when I was a kind of a beginner weightlifter. And if you can do them, you basically can't do too many of them within training, within reason. So weighted, unweighted for reps with holds, they are just it's basically the opposite of the reverse hyper. They're an essential for weightlifters in a lot of countries. A lot of countries just back extensions are just part of your session. You do your abs and your back extensions. Like that is a huge part of training.
Yeah, I'd say the next thing I'd go to then is like your single arm cheetah rows, barbell rows, all those kind of things where you're holding that kind of bottom of the RDL position and doing work there. I think that's very, very valuable to make your back strong at maintaining a position.
In the lower back?
Yeah.
Go on.
So like if you're there with your knees almost fully locked, shoulders at the same height as your hips, and you're doing your rows in those positions, you might be doing like IYTWs in that position. It just makes your back very, very strong at maintaining a position and getting very good, like an ability to maintain contraction over a very long period of time. So I think that's what catches people, is their back might be strong enough to do if your back gets tired in back squats, right, and your back is strong enough to do 2 or 3 reps or even 1 rep, but then when you go beyond that, your form starts to break down. Like it's your inability to maintain that contraction over a prolonged period, and then you slipping into bad form is what's causing you to be sore.
For the last one for that, I really like, the kind of some people call them or Superman planks, but the kind of paraglider one where you're lying on your stomach and your hands and legs off the ground. So like overarching your mid and kind of lower back as much as you can, holding that for time. That is hard for everyone. So if you get good enough at that, you can add some like small 5 kilo plates on your upper back. That is a phenomenal one. And like if you haven't done that, you, no matter how strong you are, you probably can't hold that for more than like 30 seconds before cramping up if you've never done that.
Those like really specific exercises are so good. like as a strength athlete, you basically can't have too strong of a back.
Literally, no.
And don't get that confused with like you can't overtrain your lower back, because you can overtrain it like a bitch, but like you can definitely go too hard on these exercises, but just keep at them, like keep going.
I think we've time for one more question, and I think it's so one person wants to know how much carryover does the conventional deadlift have to Olympic lifts, and the other one is why aren't heavy deadlifts programmed more in weightlifting with back offsets, keep speed? So seems to be, so if we're talking about like a training methodology in countries, so us personally at Sika Strength, we love clean deadlifts, like we do. Having a strong pull only makes sense, but a lot of weightlifting countries, as many do, seem to be, most of them like clean deadlifts and clean pulls and clean snatch pulls. The problem with doing, I think, heavy deadlifts is there's can be a perception, like the person just actually, case in point here, said, why don't you do back offs to keep your speed? But you're not doing clean deadlifts for speed, you're doing them for strength. You know, you're not trying to chain that particular modality of your skills. So like Miso thinks his best clean deadlift is 250, which is, it's clearly not, but that's what he gets. Whereas Gabriel loves clean deadlifts, loves them. He knows, he did like 305 really fast, I'd imagine. Germany loves them. You can see from them and the experiences we had with them, they love them. But then we had the Bulgarians who basically did no pulls as far as we're aware of. Miso then does loads of like heavy block pulls, really heavy, loves heavy snatch pulls. So I think more the Western world doesn't do a lot of clean deadlifts. And right, I think it's because in like weightlifting countries, in inverted commas, like not the UK, Western Europe, or America, the US. Like over here, right, we have this thing where it's like conventional deadlift, and you're wearing flat shoes, your shins are vertical, you're sitting back in your ass, you're like just trying to get the bar past your knees and then open your, like, Joe, it's an incredibly different position. Whereas if you look at deadlifts in the Eastern Bloc, or you look at like the Russians doing their deadlifts, they're setting up like a clean. Like even when they're doing like a max deadlift in inverted commas, it looks like a clean when they're setting up. And that is the difference. Like there's obviously differences in speed, but like as we mentioned at the start, when we're doing clean pulls, we're doing them to get strong at clean pulls, not to be fast in the clean. But like taking away from all the speed and all the power outputs and all those different metrics, the real difference is the positioning during the pull. And like it just happened, like it's just the way it is, that it's a very, very quad dominant first pull off the ground in weightlifting, and it's just not that much in powerlifting. I think probably the reason you don't see really heavy deadlifts is because they're just so fatiguing, and there's kind of no reason, if you're clean and jerking 150 kilos, to be able to deadlift 280 kilos and then hugely fatigue yourself for up to 10 to 14 days for some people with heavy deadlifts. So it really gets you, and especially if you're a weightlifter, you're probably not used to that massive time under tension. And I know a heavy deadlift doesn't seem like a long time under tension, but when you have a lift that lasts 1.4 seconds,
you haven't seen my deadlift.
Like it is murder. So there's not a whole lot of, like, the trade-off isn't really worth it. So you're kind of like, you don't see people going super max and clean deadlifts. Now some countries do, but like the Chinese, for example, Gabriel loves his kind of ultra max, like 120% or more. But for most people, the trade-off is most people the trade-off isn't really kind of worth it for heavy deadlifts. But you should definitely be doing a lot of deadlifts in your training, as much as you're squatting in terms of volume, I would say.
Okay, we'll call it there.
Thanks for listening, guys,
and watching. And
if you're on YouTube, feel free to leave questions in the comments that you want us to answer, and we'll get to them on the episode after this.
There's also if you don't agree with things here, which sometimes people don't agree with things,
let us know why.
Let us know why. Put it in the comments.
Leave a good comment where you think I don't agree with that, and we love it. Okay, we gotta go. Thanks.